I titled today's conversation mind map, Everything Happens Automatically. Everything happens automatically, inspired by this passage here from the book, The Power of Awareness by Neville Goddard. He said, the question is often asked what should be done between the assumption of the wish fulfilled and its realization. Nothing. It is a delusion that other than assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you can do anything to aid the realization of your desire. Everything happens automatically. Everything happens automatically. Now, this might not make any sense. How does everything happen automatically? Well, that is how the power of awareness works. See, the individual may look to this world here, and they may see patterns playing out. And they say, okay, this thing happens, and then this other thing happens, and then this other thing happens. Therefore, that is how it should play out. That is how it must play out. Condition A needs to be in place first, then condition B needs to be there in order for condition C to be there. Now, as I always say, you are already that which you desire to be. You already have what you desire. Not because of this or that condition. Why I say that is the individual may think, in order to manifest the money, in order to manifest the relationship, in order to manifest this or that, condition A needs to be there first, because they observe this world and they see patterns and they say, those are the patterns that must be there. They need to be there. Absolutely, they need to be there. Yet, what I have seen personally, and I've been applying this information since 2004 when I came across it through Think and Grow Rich, is exactly like how it states in the Bible, my ways are past finding out. I've seen it play out in those ways at times where there's this A that's there, and then B that's there, and then all of a sudden C shows up, and we can say it's easy to conclude that it's because of A and C. Yet what I've also seen is ways that go beyond whatever those conditions are. So from personal experience, when I got involved with getting out of $50,000 debt by knowing that I have in my possession $25,000 in my bank account, this was back in 2004. He says that in Think and Grow Rich, that's how it works. You just set a definite chief aim, and then some way, somehow, it happens. And then I was like, what do I do along the way? Well, what he was articulating in the subconscious mind chapter and the autosuggestion chapter and the sixth sense chapter, which to me are my favorite chapters from Think and Grow Rich. I love all the chapters, but those ones I refer to a lot on this channel because they have been very helpful for me, is these beliefs that this or that condition needs to be there. And one of the conditions was I need to work very hard in order to get money. So the way I look at it is those conditions are distorting reality. I have found that over the years of applying this information, that everything happens automatically and naturally in flow. It just happens. Yet only I can place these conditions in mind, which distort reality. Practically speaking, the opportunity might be right there in front of my face. But because let's say I was identified with a particular condition that says this other thing needs to be there. And that is the opportunity. So, in other words, in accordance to the condition I was identified with, only through hard work, money can appear. Hard work first equals money. That was the belief. Now, that actually works because I believe it works that way. There's a condition in mind that suggests that is the way that it works. Yet I am also beyond that condition. I can identify with this, I can identify with that, yet who am I? Well, as we've been discussing, you are that pure awareness that I am prior to all these individual conditions that suggest Jim or Bob does it this way or that way, therefore that is the way. I have done it this way or that way in the past, therefore that is the way. The way is beyond these conditions placed in mind by the individuals. I am the way. That is the way. The way of the infinite. Now, as I dropped these conditions, by releasing identification to these conditions, what happened was money started to show up in ways that I would not call hard work or force or stress or frustration. They would start to show up in ways that were the path of least resistance, naturally, effortlessly, we can say it that way as well. Now here's the interesting thing. As I had dropped these conditions over the years, whatsoever things I desire, as stated in Mark 11:24, whatsoever things ye desire, pray as though ye have received them, or received it. That's one of the translations, received, and it will be yours. All these things happen easier, faster, in ways that I can call magical, totally out of the box, non-linear. Now, sometimes it did play out in a way that it was articulated in the various books that I read. So in business books, for example, I might read something on marketing or sales or something like that. And then I might think that that's the way it works. I need to do it that way. And if I don't do it that way, it's not going to work. So that is just a condition. You can clearly see it. Now the opportunities are presented. They're all around us, essentially. They're always here. And we don't need to worry about them. You just naturally seize these opportunities, and you continue to seize these opportunities in flow. Or another way I say it is, what you do, what you don't do, what you say, what you don't say, etc., happens spontaneously, naturally, effortlessly in flow. I may do this, I may not. I may do that, I may not. Yet I don't do those things. Everything happens. As he said here, the illusion of free will to do is but ignorance of the law of assumption upon which all action is based. Everything happens automatically. Also, as it says in the Bible, I can of myself do nothing, the Father would then do it the work. The Father is that still I am presence. Exodus 3:14. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. So, what I have found is these conditions fall away. They just drop, fall away. I trust you've noticed this as well if you've been applying it in the way that I'm going to share right now. When you know that you are completely fulfilled, and that is all desire was pointing to. Whatsoever things ye desire, pray as though ye have received it, and it will be yours. Well, Joseph Murphy said, desire is prayer. So desire is simple acknowledgement of knowing that you are already that which you desire to be. Desire means having, as I say sometimes, or desire means being. Or you could say, desire points to being, or desire points to having. Or you could say, desire points to fulfillment. Now you are that fulfillment. I am equals fulfillment. Thus I desire to know that I am. I am eternally, completely fulfilled 100%. You are completely fulfilled now and forever now. Not because of this or that appearance. Yes, you can experience your fulfillment with the appearances. For example, you can call it a fulfilling relationship, or a fulfilling business, or a fulfilling life experience. Yet, you are that fulfillment. That fulfillment just appears that way. It just happens that way. Whatsoever things you desire, you imagine yourself, naturally, you imagine yourself having what you desire. I like to articulate this here with the Robert Dill's logical levels. Here you are on the top, existing as perfection. I and the Father are one. So the Father's name again, I am, Exodus 3:14. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And that is that still I am presence. The eternal, supreme peace of God. You know, I like the word Ananda. Ananda may be translated into peace, bliss, happiness, joy. In other words, that still I am presence was everything that you were looking for your entire life, and you are that. How do you know you are that? Well, notice that in the silence, in a meditation, while in flow, there are no illusions of I. There's no this versus that, me versus them. Everyone and everything just spontaneously appears to be in harmony as it is. Everything just is. That is the way. Or you could say, everything just is the way, that way. So, you, as an individual, have a desire, whatever it may be. Wonderful relationship, wonderful business, particular money in your bank account. You naturally imagine yourself thus having what you desire, being that which you desire to be. Here in the Robert Dill's logical levels, I put this I on the top. It's not part of the logical levels that he created, but I like to put the I on the top. That I represents you. That existence, consciousness, bliss. Sat Chit Ananda, truth, consciousness, bliss. I am that pure awareness. My real nature is Ananda, peace, joy, happiness, bliss, for no reason. Not because of this or that reason. Now, as I know that I am completely fulfilled, I do not interfere anymore with how things play out. As a matter of fact, I do not worry at all about how things play out because I know certainly, as I abide as I am, and as mentioned, you abide as you are beyond conditions, as in you're not identified with conditions because they're illusory to you in meditation, in flow, in the silence. You know certainly that everything happens automatically. These conditions are only in mind. The conditions dissolve, and the experience can be described as they dissolve along the way of life. Why I say it that way is, as I know that I'm completely fulfilled, these thoughts may appear in mind. and as I've been saying lately, they appear to disappear. These thoughts that suggest I need to do this or that in order to be fulfilled. I need to do this or that in order to be fulfilled, that doesn't make any sense. That still I am presence is the fulfillment. It is the supreme existence, bliss, the bliss of existence. In other words, I feel completely fulfilled wherever I am, not because of these appearances, whatever appears in this world, yet I can celebrate life with these appearances. So we celebrate life through desire. Now you can say, you desire fulfillment. Now that might not make any sense. You desire fulfillment. Of course you are fulfilled, so why do you desire fulfillment then? Well, more accurately put, you desire to experience your fulfillment. Where else can you experience your fulfillment apart from consciousness? I am that pure awareness. My real nature, I know, abiding as I am, is fulfillment. And so I desire to experience my fulfillment in consciousness. As all these things, as also stated in the Bible, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. So we can call it right thinking. If you think, you really think for yourself, as I say sometimes. So if a thought appears in mind that does not represent you, you no longer identify with it. These thoughts spawn from conditions stored in the subconscious mind, which are dissolved along the way as you know that still I am presence is the complete fulfillment. So practically speaking, the way I do it is anytime a desire arises, I know that I am. That's it. Desire points to being completely fulfilled now and always now. And as I practice this over the years, anytime a desire arises, thank you, I am. That's prayer. Desire is prayer, as Joseph Murphy said. I know that I am fulfilled because I feel fulfilled in the moment, not because of this or that reason. I just accept that I am through desire. That's it. That's prayer. So you have a vision, whatever it may be. Particular amount of money, relationship, business, etc. Those are what I call symbols of fulfillment. So we mentioned, whatsoever things ye desire, as stated in Mark 11:24, pray as though ye have received it, and it will be yours. Simple acknowledgement. And so you naturally imagine yourself doing that thing that you desire to do, having that car, etc. That's your vision. Or as Napoleon Hill had articulated in Think and Grow Rich, you may write it down as a definite chief aim. Now, when you say definite chief aim, it could sound like you're aiming out there. A way of looking at it is it's a simple reminder. It's a simple reminder if you can benefit from having reminders, having a definite chief aim, or a card where you write your definite chief aim down. Because every time you read the card, let's say you forget that you are that already. You read the card, and then you do feel right away that this trying to figure out, the wanting, needing, waiting, craving ceases. Because you intuitively know that you are that, even if there's no visible signs. Like if you look at your bank statement, and I'm speaking from experience, if I looked at my bank statement and said, oh, there's no $25,000 in this bank account, and then I would worry, I would stress, I would be frustrated, that would just generate illusions of separation, is what I like to call it. I would think then that I lack, that I do not have what I desire. So desires arise from the heart of awareness. I know that I am what I imagine myself to be. So now, all these layers here in the Robert Dilts logical levels transform. They all appear to transform. Now, as mentioned, everything happens automatically. So all these things happen automatically. They happen spontaneously and naturally. This identity, which we can call the personal identity, may also appear to transform. And by that it is meant your personality might appear to transform. You might notice that you're defining yourself in a different way than you did before. Yet the way that you define yourself as this personal identity transforms is more aligned with who you are. Maybe you look at yourself in the mirror. Maybe now how you carry yourself, how you dress, feels more like who you naturally are, is a way that we could describe it. So I find that these desires, or these definite chief aims, as Napoleon Hill had articulated, not only do you get to experience the symbols of fulfillment. It's one thing to say, I am fulfilled, I am fulfilled. It's another thing to experience that fulfillment and know this is real talk right here. It could sound unbelievable based on conditioning. That's why we applied this. And so having applied it since 2004, I see it all the time, everywhere. This personal identity has been evolving over the years. Prior to Think and Grow Rich, I was moving up in my corporate career, yet it was very stress and force-based. And then after Think and Grow Rich and applying what we're talking about here, what happened was it would happen more naturally, effortlessly, spontaneously. I remember times where they were downsizing the department, and I just happened to be in the pool that wasn't downsized. And people would come up to me and they're like, I don't know how you managed to squeak past that one, but everything pointed to you having the criteria to be part of that downsize. If I was identified with those conditions, if I didn't meet this or that criteria, that could potentially play out as theater. I always say, these conditions can play out as theater, no shame, no condemnation. You just don't identify with them anymore, and they no longer play out as theater. So maybe these are patterns that have played out. The person is always forcing themselves or stressing themselves or something like that. It doesn't mean that it always has to be that way. You dissolve those conditions by no longer identifying with them. And by that it is meant, you can look at it as there's a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. And there's also a space before you react to any of this kind of programming, which is just conditions stored in the subconscious mind. As you know that you are prior to, you are that space that is the perfection. You need not do anything to earn that perfection. You don't play out those patterns anymore that suggest you need to do this or those things subconsciously, this or that thing subconsciously, in order to get what you want. And then it just generates a bunch of suffering. You just don't do it in the moment. You access that fulfillment in the moment, and that fulfillment appears. And you've transcended the pattern. So the personal identity continues to evolve. So it's this personal identity of, this Joseph is this way. He moved up in the corporate career. Now he's in this position where he can go into management, yet now all of a sudden he's embodying this identity of the entrepreneur, and a particular kind of entrepreneur involved in the tech space, etc., etc. So that's what we call personal identity. That identity is not static. It continues to evolve. It continues to transform as you continue to become more of who you are. You are already that absolute supreme perfection, existing as perfection, never ending, yet the mind can conceive glimpses of that perfection. And so it appears as becoming more of that perfection, yet you are already that. It just unfolds. That's another way of saying it. You just become more of who you are. It just unfolds that way. Here's the thing about it. I am not identified with this personal identity. I am not this personal identity. This personal identity just continues to evolve, continues to transform. It's a manifestation of that perfection that I found through desire. Desire pointed to fulfillment. I imagine myself to be this individual the personal identity began to transform to reflect the individual that I saw myself as in my imagination, here, vision. Desire pointed to fulfillment. I naturally imagine myself being that person. I know that I was already that in imagination. It just unfolded, it manifested that way. So these other layers also can transform. The values and beliefs. So the individual might say, oh, I believe this now, or I don't believe this now, or something like that. There's a lot of things that people share with me that they say they believe now, but they didn't believe many years ago. Or someone might say, I no longer believe this, or I no longer believe that. Now, I personally recommend not replacing one limiting belief with another limiting belief and another limiting belief and playing that kind of game of replacing one condition with another condition. I suggest releasing the conditions. And then whatever you could say appear to believe also just happens. Yet I know that I am prior to those beliefs. I am prior to the identity. I am prior to the vision, always existing as perfection. That is the sheer foundation, complete fulfillment. Now it also transforms our capabilities or skills. So I mentioned that along the way in my entrepreneurial journey, I had acquired skills which include direct response marketing, copywriting, consultative sales, and these various entrepreneurial skills. All those skills and capabilities were cultivated naturally in flow without resistance. Like he said, everything happens automatically. At times, if it felt stress or force-based, I knew that it was conditioning in mind. For example, I snowboard. So as I go down the slopes, I enjoy the runs. Let's say I desire to go down another slope, which through perception appears as more challenging. There may be fear experienced in the body. Nothing wrong with that. That fear arises from conditions. Because let's say if a person was not afraid and they went down that slope, they wouldn't feel the fear. If a person was afraid and they went down the slope, they would feel the fear. Now, some individuals might not allow themselves to go down the slope because they say that fear is holding them back. Now, fear arises from the conditioning. The conditioning generates the emotional experience of fear. So we can drop that conditioning. We know in the moment that we are not that condition. Everything happens automatically. So we let everything happen automatically by not identifying with that condition. As mentioned, we can look at it as there could be a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, yet there's always the space where you can be as you are. Now, this can appear as the individual dropping that fear prior to making that run, and they make that run without the fear. Or fear might still be there while they're going down the slope, yet they don't say that the fear is holding them back anymore. They're not suppressing or repressing the emotions. They're released along the way. Now, that's the way I've noticed that I've done things over the years. I didn't let an emotion hold me back from doing what I want to do. That's illusory. The emotion does not hold you back. It's not like the emotion saying to you, I am holding you back. It's not saying that. The person may think that the emotions are holding them back, yet the emotions are energy in motion. Now, we can get into the nuances of this in upcoming videos if you would like. There are many benefits for letting the emotions flow or letting the emotions be, allowing them to arise and subside. And these are physical benefits in the body, neurological benefits. There's so many benefits to applying what we're talking about here, exactly like what we're talking about here. So again, the emotions are not suppressed or repressed. We don't pretend like they don't exist. That's not what this is about. When I say you are that complete fulfillment, you are fulfilled prior to the emotions. Existence is the fulfillment. That is it. So thus, how can the emotions suggest that you lack or you are this or you are that in a limited way? That's just based on thoughts associated to the emotions. And you can no longer identify with those thoughts. They appear to disappear. Now, as those thoughts appear to disappear, correspondingly, body and emotions naturally flow. Everything actually flows. So behaviors, what you do, what you don't do, etc., flows naturally. Environments may appear to transform. You may end up in a different environment, or the existing environment that you're in may transform to be, we can say, supportive of the vision, or in harmony with the vision, or in collaboration with the vision. So then all these things happen to transform automatically. We can say it that way. And so it is described as, sometimes I refer to this as a flow-based journey to manifesting the vision, rather than a stress or force-based one. It's going to happen anyways. Now, in the earlier stages, it was an interesting idea, Think and Grow Rich. But then when it happened, and then I applied it again and again, I said, of course, it always happens. Now, interestingly, is along the way, I can enjoy it in a flow-based way, or I can worry, stress, be frustrated, emotional turmoil, overthinking, intrusive thoughts, etc. I'm going to have it anyways. Might as well get there first class, is another way of saying it. First class journey to the first class destination. So how do I get there first class? Well, you get there first class by getting there first class. And by that it is meant dropping these conditions, which we can call third class. They're clearly conditions. They generate stress, frustration, force, etc. And they are not you. You are prior to those. You can identify with them if you would like. That's the beautiful thing about the two gifts, as stated in the Hermetica. Two gifts were bestowed upon humanity. They were mind and speech. The beautiful thing about mind and speech is you could think whatever you'd like. The individual at a particular point realizes that they can think whatever they'd like. And then they ask themselves the question, do I want to continue thinking in this way that is generating emotional turmoil, generating resistance, just essentially identifying with the conditions because they think that they need to think that way in order to get what they want, as mentioned earlier. Yet it's not true. They can drop those conditions. No longer think that way. Or as I say sometimes, you are already that which you desire to be. You already have what you desire. There's no need to think otherwise. Or to use Neville Goddard's term, assumption, there's no need to assume otherwise. You are already that which you desire to be. You already have what you desire. Desire points to fulfillment. There's no need to assume otherwise. You already saw yourself having what you desire in your imagination. You know that you are that already which you desire to be. There's no need to assume otherwise. There's no need to assume otherwise. All these conditions fall away. All these areas appear to transform. Personal identity appears to transform. Values and beliefs may appear to transform. And these capabilities, if applicable, related to what you're manifesting, the behaviors, the environment, appear to transform as well, effortlessly. And so when he says everything happens automatically, it could sound unbelievable to the individual that's identified with those conditions. Yet those conditions can drop. As I said, there's no need to assume otherwise. You just no longer identify with them. Now, in the earlier stages, if I was communicating it in the way that I'm communicating right now, I'd say things like, can it really be like that? Can I just drop these conditions? Can I stop thinking like that? Well, over the years, I made a number of discussions on the 7-Day Mental Diet by Emmett Fox. And over the years, I have practiced being aware of these thoughts, appearing to disappear and not identifying with them. And I can assure you, it gets easier and easier and easier. If they appear in mind, you no longer identify with them. And you can really describe it that way, as they appear to disappear. Now, the result of that is you do see that everything happens naturally, spontaneously in flow. Everything happens automatically. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You could say, I know that I am already that which I desire to be. I exist as complete fulfillment. That fulfillment I am. From the sure foundation of being as I am, everything happens automatically to manifest all these things that I desire. The first class journey to the first class destination happening effortlessly, spontaneously, naturally in flow. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.